Welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name's Calvin, and today's video is a review on the Alienware M15 R3. I'll be answering, is this notebook worth the premium that you pay, and is it the fastest one I've ever tested? Watch to find out. Let's roll. I've had the pleasure of putting this thing through its paces over the last few days, and I have to say I've been impressed. I've been scrutinizing it up and down, really trying to use it the way I would if I were to keep it long term. And I have to say I'm really close on this one. This one is one of the nicest ones I've tested so far. And I have to say Dell has put a lot of details into this model. And so I'm going to share some of those details throughout the video with you. So let's take a look under the hood. This thing comes loaded. So cracking it open, the first thing you'll notice is that the motherboard is flipped. So if you are looking to replace the GPU and CPU, you're going to take a little bit more effort to get to those components. But the specs on this are pretty impressive. This features a i9 10980HK, that's 8 core 16 threads, boosting up to 5.3 gigahertz. The screen is an incredible 300 hertz, 3 millisecond response time, and up to 100% of the sRGB. 32 gigs of dual channel memory at 2666, and it features a total of 2 terabytes of NVMe SSD in a RAID 0. It also comes with an NVIDIA 2080 Super Max-Q going all the way up to 115 watts and a battery of 86 watt hours. That's all crammed into a package that weighs only 4.65 pounds. This unit is riddled with vents for cooling though. Like, it even has this honeycomb pattern at the top. So on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, it actually is drawing in cooler air, and then in the middle, it seems like it's exhausting some of that hot air. Of course, we have a similar honeycomb design on the back. This is both intakes for GPU and CPU. And then both the left and the right actually are exhaust ports along with the rear. So it has a tremendous amount of cooling on this unit. And I can tell you it does work. So I'll share a little bit more about that. So the other feature on this unit is the construction that they chose to use with this is a magnesium alloy. So the benefit to that is it is lighter weight than aluminum. So you do get that extra lightness, but it also aids in the cooling of the unit. So the one feature I really like about this that you're going to use very often is the keyboard. That actually features a 1.7 millimeter key travel, but also it gives a really nice tactile feel. The keys are spaced very nicely across the board, and the other component is that the keys are not that loud while typing. So I found that this really hit a lot of the check marks around a keyboard. So heat on the top deck, I've seen it as high as 50 degrees on this unit, really around this the area near the screen up in the top middle, and then around the bottom here, where I saw the most consistent amount of heat, which is to be expected, is around the exhaust port. So that's actually the 50 degrees, which is fairly hot. It actually doesn't get hot where your hands are. So that was kind of an issue that I found with the Razer Blade 15, is that your palms would get kind of sweaty just being on the palm rests. And on this unit, it actually keeps it quite cool, and I never had any issues with that. Now, moving into the Alien Command Center. This is actually quite nice. One of the features I noticed right off the hop is actually it can scan in your game library, can actually activate specific thermal profiles for each of the games. So I found that was pretty interesting. It worked quite well. It was seamless when you moved in between games. It would activate the profile and carry on. And so that was one thing that I really wish all manufacturers would do with their utilities. You can change the RGB light within the FX settings. There is several settings baked in, so you can choose breathing mode, Night Rider, there's a number of them that you can choose from. And then you can, of course, customize them as you wish. Of course, you can turn everything off if you choose. Also, function key F12 does the same thing. So if you really want to quickly put into stealth mode, you can do that. Now within the Fusion module itself, you can access all the thermal profiles and ability to overclock, and what I thought was interesting is the ability to undervolt. And I like that Dell has allowed this right within the app, so you don't have to go and use XTU or throttle stop. You know, you may still prefer that, but what I found is it was just that much more user friendly, and still had all the core components of what you need to do undervolting. Just really made it that much more seamless. Now, noise levels. We had quiet at 33 decibels. That's basically idle. The fans are still working inside of there and expelling heat. It's almost imperceptible in terms of how loud that is. Now, moving up into balance mode, that will typically, when in games, be around about 45 decibels to 50 decibels. Performance will get you at about 50 to 55 decibels, and at full speed, you're around 60 to 63 decibels. So let's get to the benchmarks. The Alienware came in at 6547 for PC Mark 10. So with Cinebench R20, the balance came in at 4154. You know, this definitely decimated all the rest of the notebooks I've tested so far, being that it's at the top of the Intel mobile family. But the one thing that I wanted to put in here was actually undervolting. So this was able to give us better performance as well as better thermals. So typically I was seeing that balance hit all the way up to 100 degrees Celsius at load, which is the max of that processor and what Dell allows on this notebook. So now moving over to Call of Duty. This came in at 89.2, just edging out the Omen 2019. Now this is in performance mode with undervolting and overclocking. I can tell you though, it didn't make much of a difference in this benchmark. It really was only a few frames difference, but I wanted to showcase what it was capable of. All right, so now moving over to Shadow of the Tomb Raider. So the Alienware came in at 109 frames per second on this at the highest settings. All right, so now moving over to the 3D Mark tests. So in Time Spy, it crested 9407, and in Fire Strike Extreme, we hit all the way up to 10,999. Moving over to Anno 1800, this one again crushed it at 115 frames per second. Again, this is very CPU intensive, and so we saw the power of the 8-core 16 threads really flexing its muscle here. Moving over to Metro Exodus, the story continues. It hit the top of the marks all the way through on each of the different settings. So now moving over to Death Stranding. This I wanted to actually show the differences between the different sound levels and modes. At quiet, it was at 98 frames per second, and in performance mode, that was 105 frames per second. Now, the delta between this is almost 15 decibels difference, which is shocking for the 7 frames that you get, which is pretty compelling to just stay into quiet mode. Now moving over to Forza Horizon 4, the Alienware came in at 135 frames per second, being the fastest out of the bunch so far. I added Flight Simulator to the mix. What I will say is, I'll preface this was one of the landing activities. So you come in through a valley and then land on a small short strip. This did average around 52 frames a second. You can see whether it was in performance or quiet mode, it was really the same performance from a frames per second. So now I will say that if you are going through cities and it's really dense in terms of the ground, you won't see 50 frames a second. This will likely drop all the way down to 30 or even lower in some cases. But I wanted to be able to do a consistent run each time going forward, and so this is what we have to work with. Now moving over to Fortnite, saw an average of about 130 frames per second, and then in Apex Legends seeing about 155 to 160 frames per second depending on the thermal profile. So now we're going to move over to Red Dead Redemption 2, all ultra settings. 3 profiles here, 1 in quiet mode, stock from factory, and then 2 with undervolting and overclocking of the GPU. That is both in performance and quiet mode. You can see here that actually in quiet mode, undervolted and overclocked on the GPU actually has the highest frames per second, and some of the lowest sound levels at only 40 decibels. So this is really impressive that it can keep it so cool and so quiet while running this pretty GPU intensive game. So now moving over to Tomb Raider, this I wanted to actually show all the different thermal profiles from factory and then their equivalent undervolted and GPU overclocked. And you can see how much of a difference this makes across the board. And really, in this segment, the performance undervolt and overclock was actually the king at 109 frames per second. So that was the benchmarks, guys. Now, I am blown away by the thermal capacity in this unit. But not literally, because it did not have to ramp up the fans to unbearable levels. And in fact, I was able to overclock both the GPU core and memory without any noticeable increase in temperature. That's thermal headroom. Like, that is so impressive. Dell has really gone above and beyond with the cooling solution in here. So let's talk about the flaws. So while the screen is great, it's 300 hertz, 3 millisecond response, 100% of the sRGB, this unit did come with some minor screen bleed. Now it is minor, it is only in the lower left-hand corner, but it's still an annoyance. You know, you pay so much money for a great notebook, but it isn't nearly as bad as some of the other notebooks that I've looked at. And so this is something that you may want to overlook, and because it is really luck of the draw, this may not end up affecting you. So now, battery life. This does have a decent battery in terms of watt hour. However, it is abysmal. Like, I mean abysmal. I saw 90 minutes just in a word processor. 90 minutes. I kid you not. Not gaming. In fact, any of the games that I did test while on battery were so limited in terms of the overall power output that you would really have to lower the settings if you're going to play. And even at that point, I don't think the battery would last very long at all. And so 90 minutes was all I could get out of this. I've seen other reviewers actually post higher, not that much more, just under 2 hours, but your results may vary. But the reality is that you're not going to be going very far without being able to plug this into the wall. So a note on the SSDs. This came with two 1 terabyte NVMe drives in a RAID 0. I would have expected it to be almost double the bandwidth, but I was only actually seeing about 2.6 gigs on reads and 2.3 on writes. Now, in a RAID 0, I would have expected that to be into the 4s and 5s if it had the full potential here. So I anticipate what's happened is those two modules are actually sharing the same PCIe lanes back to the CPU, which are effectively throttling it. Just be aware of this when you're speccing it out. So when you're looking at the configurator, I would just go with the cheaper option at the end of the day. Now, the exterior clear coat they've used is impressive. I haven't had to clean this unit in the last few days. You remember seeing that Razer Blade 15, how fingerprint prone it is. You know, you get a little bit of smudging on this. I'll blame my little toddler, my 2-year-old, on that, but even with his hands all over it, it's held up quite well. So they've really done a great job with picking the right formula to give that a great finish. So in terms of speakers, it actually has two front firing speakers and then two firing speakers underneath. And this actually creates a great effect, which allows for positional audio. So in fact, I was in Modern Warfare and I could actually get a good sense of the sound coming from to my left, but not just like your typical stereo. It had depth, and so you knew it wasn't just like right beside you. You could tell that it was further back. So I think Dell has done a really good job in terms of creating a great audio experience, and couple that with the fact that the thermal performance and the noise levels are so low, you can actually game with this without a headset, and that's fantastic. In terms of the one hand open, I will give it a pass on this. The hinge did loosen up over the last couple days, just a little bit. So that friction has come off. I hope that's not a sign that it's going to get too loose over multiple years to come, but for right now, that's a pass. Final thoughts on the M15R3. I have to say Dell has done an incredible job on this unit. The fact that the thermals are so good in here, it's actually topped all the benchmarks in terms of performance. I think they've really created a great machine here. Now, that being said, value for the money, this is nearly 2 times the cost and you don't get 2 times the performance. Now, you can spec this far more economically, and I would say that would be my recommendation. So I do recommend the model. I don't recommend the spec specifically. So based on the review, you can tell what I value in terms of a gaming notebook and what I'd be looking for. And I would say in terms of the model itself, this is easily an IMO score of 8.5 out of 10. And I think in the future, I will look at possibly bringing in one with a little bit different spec in it to see how that performs. So let me know what you think below. Please like and subscribe to the channel. I hope you liked the video, and until next time, bye for now.